On the afternoon of my own son's welcome party, the baby I had begged the universe for through 8 long years of heartbreak, my sister wrapped her manicured hands around my shoulders and shoved me backward down a full flight of polished hardwood stairs in front of 40 smiling guests. As my heels left the top step and the chandelier above me tilted sideways into a blur of gold light, in that one frozen half second before the world dropped into blackness, I pressed my thumb against the screen of my phone and let the entire room hear the recording that turned every champagne toast into a scream. But before I tell you how I lost almost everything to the two people I trusted most in this world, and the sickening truth about the child sleeping in that nursery, do me one small favor. Drop a comment right now and tell me where on this planet you are watching from and what time it is where you are sitting. I genuinely love seeing how far this little family of strangers stretches across the map. Now let me take you back to where the nightmare was first stitched together. Hi, my name is Diana, and I am 34 years old. If you had met me 2 years ago, you would have seen a woman who measured her entire worth by how completely she could give herself away to the people she loved. I lived in a quiet hillside neighborhood on the edge of Denver, Colorado, in a modest 2-story house with a red front door that I had painted myself the week we got the keys. I worked as a senior operating room nurse, specializing in anesthesia support at one of the largest surgical hospitals in the city. I was very good at my job. I spent my long shifts in cold, sterile rooms, watching monitors, counting heartbeats, holding the hands of frightened patients in the last seconds before they drifted under. I lived in a world of precision, of documentation, of charts and timestamps and signatures that had to be exactly right or people could die. That habit of recording everything, of trusting nothing to memory, would one day save my entire life, but I did not know that yet. I had been married to my husband Marcus for 9 years. He was charming in that easy, effortless way that made strangers like him within 30 seconds. He sold commercial real estate, and he was the kind of man who never paid for his own coffee because someone always insisted. I adored him. From the moment we married, the only thing we both wanted, the thing we talked about under the covers in the dark, was a baby, a house full of small, loud feet. But year after year, my body refused. We tried everything. We tried 4 full rounds of fertility treatment, each one costing us close to $28,000 out of pocket because our insurance covered almost nothing. Each round ended the same way, with a quiet phone call and a long drive home where neither of us spoke. I started to believe I was broken. I started to believe I was the reason our family would never exist. I am a saver. I have always been a saver. While Marcus spent freely, I quietly tucked money away. Over 8 careful years of double shifts and skipped vacations, I had built up a savings account holding exactly $300,000. That money was the down payment on our future, the seed of a bigger home, the cushion against the rainy day I always feared was coming. And then, 2 years ago, my younger sister Hannah walked into my kitchen, sat down at my table, took both of my hands in hers, and offered to give me the one thing I could not buy. Hannah was 29, beautiful in a way that turned heads, and she had always lived a little wildly, drifting between jobs and boyfriends while I paid her overdue bills and never once asked for the money back. That morning, she looked me in the eyes with tears running down her face and told me she wanted to carry my baby for me. She said she could not stand watching me grieve a child that did not exist. She said that we would use my egg and Marcus's contribution, that it would be biologically mine, and that she would simply be the oven, as she put it with a laugh. She said that this was what sisters were for, that family takes care of family, that no amount of money could ever repay what she was about to give me. I wept into her shoulder for an hour. I thought she was an angel sent to fix my broken life. I did not know I was holding the hand of the woman who was already sleeping with my husband. We moved forward. The fertility clinic created embryos. Hannah went through the transfer. And a few weeks later, when that second pink line finally appeared on a test stick after 8 years of failure, I dropped to my knees on my bathroom floor and sobbed with a joy so pure it frightened me. I threw myself into making everything perfect. I paid for every single appointment. I paid Hannah a generous monthly support amount of $3,000 so she would not have to work during the pregnancy. I bought her a brand new car so she could drive comfortably to her checkups. I renovated our spare bedroom into a soft yellow nursery with my own hands, sanding the crib, painting the walls, hanging tiny clouds from the ceiling. I was so drunk on gratitude and hope that I never once stopped to notice the things that should have stopped me cold. I never noticed how Marcus and Hannah had started finishing each other's sentences. I never noticed how they always volunteered to go to the prenatal appointments together, just the two of them, telling me to rest after my night shifts. I never noticed the new softness in the way he looked at her, or the way her hand would rest on his arm a beat too long. I was so desperate to believe in my miracle that I mistook a betrayal for a blessing. They were not building a family with me. They were building one around me, and they were almost ready to push me out of the frame entirely. The first crack appeared in my certainty during the 7th month. I am a medical professional. I read charts for a living. One evening, Hannah left her pregnancy folder on my counter, and out of pure habit, my trained eyes scanned the genetic screening summary clipped inside. Something in the maternal markers looked wrong to me, subtly, in a way I could not name but could not shake. When I gently asked Hannah about it, her face went pale for half a second before she laughed it off, said I was reading too much into hospital paperwork, said I worked too hard and saw problems everywhere. Marcus put his arm around me that night and told me I needed to stop bringing my job home, that I was stressing the baby with my anxiety. They smoothed it over so completely that I felt ashamed for even asking. But the cold feeling did not leave my stomach. So I did the one thing my training had taught me to do when something feels wrong. I started keeping records. Quietly, over the following weeks, I made copies of every document I could find. I photographed Hannah's folder when she napped, and one afternoon at the clinic, while everyone thought I had stepped out for coffee, I used my professional access and my own quiet knowledge of how these things work to arrange for a discrete comparison sample to be set aside, a few cells properly labeled and stored, waiting for the day I would need the truth. I told myself I was being paranoid. I prayed I was being paranoid. I did not yet understand that I was about to need every single thing I had collected. Then came the part of the plan that nearly worked. About a month before the due date, Marcus sat me down in our living room with a stack of papers and a warm, reassuring smile. He said that with the baby coming, with me working such brutal hours, we needed to get our finances organized and protected. He said he had spoken to a financial advisor who recommended consolidating our accounts and refinancing the house to free up money for the baby's future. He slid the papers across the coffee table and handed me a pen. I was exhausted from a 14-hour shift. My eyes were heavy, and because I trusted the man I had loved for 9 years, I signed where he pointed without reading a single line. I handed over the keys to my kingdom, and I did it with a grateful smile on my face. What I did not know that night was that the papers I signed were the beginning of the end. What I did not know was that Marcus had already opened a separate account in his name alone. What I did not know was that my $300,000 savings account, the one I had built one careful shift at a time over 8 long years, was about to be drained while I slept beside the man emptying it. The baby was born on a snowy morning in early February, a boy, 7 pounds and 4 ounces of red-faced, screaming perfection. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I forgot every doubt I had ever felt. I named him Noah. For 3 weeks, I lived in a haze of formula and lullabies and 2-hour stretches of sleep. Hannah moved into our guest room to help, she said, and Marcus glowed with a pride so warm and convincing that my fears felt like a bad dream I had imagined. I planned a small welcome party to celebrate Noah's first month, a tradition my grandmother had always kept, a way to introduce a new baby to the people who loved him. I invited 40 of our closest friends and family. I baked, I decorated. I was the happiest I had ever been in my entire life. I was also, I would soon learn, 3 days away from being thrown out of my own home with nothing. The morning of the party arrived bright and cold, our house filled with laughter, with the smell of roasting food, with neighbors cooing over the bassinet I had placed at the top of the staircase landing so everyone could admire Noah as they arrived. I was floating from room to room in a soft blue dress when I noticed Hannah's purse sitting open on the kitchen island, and inside it, a phone screen lighting up over and over. It was not Hannah's phone, it was an old spare phone of mine, one Marcus had asked to borrow months ago, telling me his had broken. The screen was buried under a wall of banking notifications. My banking notifications. My hand moved before my mind caught up. I lifted the phone, and because the security was still tied to my own face, it unlocked the instant I looked at it. I opened the banking application, and the room tilted around me. My savings account, the account that was supposed to hold $300,000, read a balance of 0. My breath caught somewhere in my chest and would not move. With shaking fingers, I scrolled through the transaction history of the past few weeks, and the truth unrolled in front of me like a knife being slowly pulled across my skin. A transfer of $180,000 to an account in Marcus's name alone. A wire of $40,000 to a real estate escrow company for a condo purchase, the new home, I would later learn, where Marcus and Hannah planned to live together. And there, attached to the refinancing of our house, was a scanned document carrying my signature, the signature I had given him half asleep that night, used to strip my name off the deed entirely. They had not borrowed from me. They had butchered me. They had taken the money I bled for, the savings I starved myself of vacations to build, and they had used it to fund the life they planned to live together without me. And the baby. The cold maternal markers I had seen months ago screamed back into my memory. I opened the photos of the documents I had saved, and I held them up against everything I now knew, and the floor fell out of the universe. The child I had named Noah, the child I had carried in my heart for 8 years, was not biologically mine at all. They had used Hannah's own egg. The baby was Hannah and Marcus's child. The surrogacy had never been a gift. It had been the perfect weapon, a way to give my husband and my sister a biological child together, to push me out as the broken, unstable, infertile wife, and to take my house and my savings on the way out the door. I was not a mother. I was not a sister. I was a wallet they had finally finished emptying. I stood frozen in that bright, warm kitchen, the sound of laughter and a baby's coo drifting in from the staircase, and something inside me went very, very quiet. The tears did not come. The woman who had spent her whole life begging to be loved, who had paid every bill and signed every paper and given away every dollar just to feel like she belonged, that woman died standing at that kitchen island. What rose up in her place was cold and clear and patient. I slipped my phone out of my pocket, opened the voice recorder, and pressed the round red button. Then I walked out into my living room full of guests, my heels steady on the floor, and I went to find my sister and my husband. They were standing together near the staircase beneath the bassinet, glowing in front of the crowd. I walked straight up to them and I said, in a voice loud enough to carry across the room, that I needed to speak with both of them about my savings account and the deed to our house, right now, in front of everyone. Marcus's smile froze and cracked. He gave a nervous laugh and told the guests that I had not been sleeping, that new mothers say strange things, that I should go lie down. I am not confused, I said, and I held up the spare phone with the banking screen glowing. I told the room that my husband had drained $300,000 from my account, that he had forged my signature to take my name off our home, that he had wired $40,000 toward a condo he had secretly bought, and that the baby everyone had come to celebrate was not mine at all, but the biological child of my husband and my own sister. The room went utterly silent. 40 faces turned white. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. Hannah's expression twisted into something ugly and panicked, and she stepped toward me, her voice climbing into a shriek. She screamed that I was a jealous, bitter, barren woman, that I had always been jealous of her, that I was lying to ruin her in front of everyone. Marcus grabbed my arm hard and hissed under his breath that I had no proof of anything, that I owned nothing anymore, that the house was his and the baby was his, and I should get out before I embarrassed myself. I looked at him with a calm that frightened even me, and I told him that I am an operating room nurse, that I document everything, that I had saved the genetic records and secured a comparison sample weeks ago, and that I had a court-ready laboratory result confirming the baby's true parentage sitting in my email at that very moment. Then I told them both that if my name was not restored to my accounts and my deed within the hour, I would be calling the Denver police to report grand theft, forgery, and fraud. The word police, spoken in front of 40 of their friends and neighbors, broke something loose in Hannah. Her face went from crimson to white. She lunged. I was standing with my back to the staircase, holding the phone with the recording still running, and my sister threw both hands against my shoulders with every ounce of her panic and rage. The floor vanished beneath my feet. I felt myself tip backward into open air, and in that frozen half-second, with the chandelier spinning above me, I pressed play and let the recording of their own voices, captured weeks earlier when they thought I was getting coffee, pour out across the silent room, every cold word of their plan laid bare. Then I hit the stairs. I do not remember the bottom. I remember the screaming. I remember the ceiling far above me, and the taste of blood and the distant wail of a baby. Through the haze, I saw my cousin Renata push past the frozen crowd, drop to her knees beside me, and hold her own phone to her ear. She was shouting that she was calling 911, that everyone had just watched Hannah throw me down a staircase, that nobody was to let Marcus or Hannah leave the house. The recording was still playing somewhere above me, my husband's voice and my sister's voice confessing everything to a room full of stunned witnesses, while I lay broken at the foot of my own stairs in my soft blue dress. The next minutes came in fragments of light and sound. Within 9 minutes, 3 police cruisers and an ambulance filled my quiet street with red and blue light. Paramedics knelt over me, pressing a bandage to the back of my head, asking me my name, telling me to stay awake. As they slid me onto a backboard, I forced my eyes open and saw the most perfectly just scene of my entire life. The cheerful party music was still playing softly from a speaker somewhere, while 2 officers pressed Marcus face first against the wall of his own living room and clicked handcuffs around his wrists. Another officer was reading Hannah her rights as she sobbed and screamed and reached helplessly toward the crowd that now stared at her like she was a stranger. 40 witnesses had seen everything. 40 phones had recorded the fall. And the truth, in their own recorded voices, was already saved in 3 places. I was rushed to the same hospital where I had spent 8 years saving the lives of strangers. The doctors treated a serious concussion and closed a deep wound on the back of my scalp with 16 stitches. But while I lay in that bed, the world moved fast. Because the crime was so clear, so thoroughly witnessed, and so completely documented, a judge granted an emergency order within days, freezing every account Marcus controlled and halting the condo purchase entirely. The forged deed transfer was challenged and frozen. My own meticulous records, the genetic documents, the secured sample, the banking screenshots, and above all the recording of their confession, formed a case so airtight that their lawyers could only advise them to brace for the worst. The legal battle that followed stretched across many long months, but I remained calm and cold through every hour of it. Hannah and Marcus wrote me letters from the county jail, tear-stained pages begging me to drop the charges, insisting that family should never destroy family, swearing that they had made a terrible mistake. I never wrote back. I handed every single letter, unopened after the first, straight to the district attorney. When the final sentencing came down, the judge offered them no sympathy. Marcus was convicted of grand theft, forgery, identity fraud, and fraudulent transfer of property, and was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. Hannah was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and felony assault for throwing a recovering woman down a staircase and received 4 years. The condo was canceled, My $300,000 was recovered and returned to me as restitution. My name was restored to my deed. Their reputations in the close-knit community they had spent years performing for were shattered beyond any repair. The baby, the one I had named Noah, was the biological child of Hannah and Marcus, and the court placed him in the care of Hannah's family while she served her sentence. I made my peace with the truth that he had never been mine, that he had been the bait in a trap, and I let him go with a quiet grief that I will always carry. I did not want a child won as a prize from people who saw children as tools. I wanted my life back, and I took it. I kept my house with the red door. I locked down every account with layers of security only I could ever touch. And slowly, with the help of a therapist and a great deal of physical recovery, I rebuilt myself from the foundation up. Almost a year into my healing, I made a decision that surprised everyone who knew me. I left the operating room and I trained to become a certified midwife. After everything that had been twisted and stolen in the name of bringing a baby into the world, I wanted to spend the rest of my life standing in that sacred room for the right reasons, holding the hands of frightened mothers, guiding new life into the world with honesty instead of lies. It was in that new life that I met Theo. He was a labor and delivery doctor at the birthing center where I trained. From the very first week, he never looked at me with pity, and he never once saw me as something to use. He saw my strength. He listened to my story without flinching, and he told me that surviving people who should have loved me was the bravest thing he had ever heard. Last weekend, Theo and I walked through a park in the Denver sunshine, my hand wrapped tightly in his, and we talked about the small house we are buying together and the family we hope to build slowly, honestly, on our own terms, with no one waiting in the shadows to take it from us. I had to lose a husband and a sister and a baby I thought was mine to finally understand that the people who truly love you never ask you to bleed for them. Standing in that sunshine, whole and free and genuinely seen for the first time in my life, I knew that I had won back the only thing that had ever really mattered, which was myself. So let me ask you this. If your own family had stolen your money, your home, and your dream of a child all at once, would you have had the strength to send them to prison the way I did? Tell me in the comments below. And if my story moved something in you today, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss what comes next. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.